Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam the President. Really, it's very painful experience to me. I spent in Iraq 3 years and a half, very enduring experience. My job in Iraq as Chief of Human Rights was to promote and protect human rights. My job in Iraq as advisor to the Special Representative of Secretary General, the SRSG, is to advise him on the right path for finding a dignified way for the Ashrafis to get out of that situation. And I must admit that I think I failed in both positions because I did not protect and I did not really change much on the ground in Ashraf. But the reality is that I witnessed a lot. And I could tell you that the experience I went through, it's extremely difficult to summarize it in a few minutes. But I'll make sure that I won't be too long. First, I would like to shed some light on the UNAMI's action vis-à-vis the Ashrafis. We operated always on the presumption of guilt of these people. Everything we did at UNAMI, we presumed that they are terrorists, and we dealt with them accordingly. I did advise UNAMI that the fundamental principle in the United Nations is to presume innocence. But unfortunately, that was not the case. We worked exactly opposite and defiance to the fundamental principle of justice, which is the presumption of innocence. On that ground, we drafted a so-called Memorandum of Understanding for the relocation of the Ashrafis from Camp Ashraf to Camp Liberty. This Memorandum of Understanding is absolutely the content of a letter addressed by the ambassador of Iraq in Brussels to the member states of the EU, telling them what's the plan and what's the program for the government of Iraq to relocate these people. In this letter, he categorically tells them these are a group of dangerous terrorists, and the government will take all necessary measures to get them out of Iraq, to expel them out of Iraq. Now, again, this letter is drafted on the presumption of guilt, and the due process of law was put aside because the government of Iraq, the current government of Iraq, when you talk about the process of law, it's something completely different. Now, the draft MOU was that it's a shared responsibility between UNAMI and the government of Iraq to close Camp Ashraf. Then we sent this draft MOU to New York, to the Department of Legal Affairs, OLA. We asked for advice. We were told, this is dangerous. You are assuming UNAMI is taking responsibility. No, we don't want you to take any responsibility. We want you to simply be facilitator. So we changed the MOU accordingly. If you look at the MOU, that they actually signed MOU, 7 clauses in the MOU, they all give the responsibility to the government of Iraq. The 7th clause of the MOU is related to the work of the UNHCR. It just sort of strips the government of Iraq from its responsibility vis-à-vis the mandate of the UNHCR. It said that even though the government agrees that the UNHCR will take the refugee status determination process, the RSD, but it's not bound by it. It will not recognize the outcome of this process. Meaning, let the UN do whatever they want to do, but we have our own way of handling the situation. That said, we started preparing, after the signature of this document, we started preparing the transfer process. And we had to first make 2 assessments. And unfortunately, most of you heard about one assessment, the humanitarian assessment in Camp Liberty. But nobody ever mentioned the security assessment of Camp Liberty. So we first made the assessment, security assessment of Camp Liberty, and we found that the camp is so vulnerable. And then we started talking about how to attenuate the vulnerability of the camp. It's by making sure that we have more Fijians, soldiers. The Fijian soldiers are the ones protecting UNAMI. To protect, not the Ashrafis, to protect the UN staff. So we were reinforced. That is to attenuate security situation. But we did not do anything to protect the Ashrafis. So now we move to second assessment of Camp Liberty. Camp Liberty was assessed by a specialist brought from the UNHCR in Addis Ababa at a very high cost. And he was brought to certify whether Camp Liberty meets the international standards or not. He arrives, we met him, and he was instructed to certify. Mr. Kobler told him, "You are not here to do anything but to certify." And the man was put in a very difficult position. I was with him. I was the first with him to visit Camp Liberty. And we all agreed that this is an acceptable situation, particularly knowing very well Ashraf, and knowing that it's not a situation of refugees who are running for their life, to save their life in emergency situation. This is what the shelter expert was looking for. We have people, like now in Syria or elsewhere in Africa, when people are actually running away to seek refuge to save their life from imminent danger. That was not the case in Ashraf. The case of Ashraf was people settled peacefully for 25 years in Camp Ashraf, and then all of a sudden, for political reasons, the government decided to evict them from their homes. So we should not make a confusion between relocation and eviction. The case of Ashraf, it was an eviction. And UNAMI was very well aware of the conditions, according to the UN standards, of an eviction. An eviction has to be done according to the due process of law by a judicial process. All this did not happen, and we were aware that we are violating the fundamental principles of the United Nations. But yet, we have to be positive according to the instructions of the SRG. Positive, it means close your eyes. Don't try to sort of expose the situation, because we are here to save life. So he claims to save life. And we know that Camp Liberty is not a place to save life. And I hear in this forum, I tell you frankly, through my connections with the Iraqis, they never hide anything concerning the Ashrafis. They always told me, we will get them. It was not a secret. And it's not also a secret that documentation is there. The Council of Ministers' decision that says we will use all means, which means including the use of force, to evict them. So we followed this process, and we signed, at UNAMI, we signed the document in order to give some kind of legitimacy to an otherwise illegal operation. So this is why, because when you look closely at the MOU, what is the role of the United Nations? There is no role of the United Nations whatsoever except to give some legitimacy to what the government of Iraq, the Prime Minister's office, wants to do. So it was done. Now, when the 9th of February attack took place, I felt that I was vindicated in a sense, that I did warn not only UNAMI, I warned UNHCR, and particularly UNHCR, I warned them even after I resigned from the UN. Last summer, I went to UNHCR and I told them there will be an attack, there will be blood, and you will be accountable for it. And all I got from them is just some smile. So now, here we are. We have covered up all kinds of illegal measures. We covered them up, and we made lies, blatant lies. We doctored documents. Yes, we did. And I was the head of the team that doctored the pictures. Now, there is also some cover-up in the human rights report. And I just tell you a very simple example of the kind of cover-up, subtle cover-up. The events of 8 April 2011, I went on the ground and I did the fact-finding. I reported that there was extrajudicial killing. When we talk about extrajudicial killing, it's different from what you have read in the human rights report, where it said there was excessive use of force. Excessive use of force, I mean, the police have the right to use force, but if they use excessive force, that means it should be called to order. But extrajudicial killing is a crime, and particularly in the circumstances of Ashraf, it was crimes against humanity. So that's the difference. But this report was drafted in Baghdad, amended here in Geneva and in New York, to come back to us in Baghdad, to be presented, before it's made public, to be presented to the government of Iraq to agree to it, and then we make it public. So this is the kind of procedure for covering up the serious violations of human rights in Iraq. Mr. President, I beg you to give me some time just to move now from UNAMI to UNHCR. Yes, 2 minutes. The story with the UNHCR, from 2009, I was trying to convince them to get involved in this process. And the leitmotif of the UNHCR at the time is that, no, these people are terrorists. We do not deal with them. We don't visit them. And you know that the UNHCR never visited Camp Ashraf till I took them there. Now, why they don't want to visit Ashraf? They said, we only deal with defectors. But I said, hold on, defectors, this is charged of political kind of meanings, but this is violation or a violation of the ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. People, whether refugees or not, they have a right to political opinion. They have a right to association and the right to express themselves. So why UNHCR wants to only deal with defectors? And to be honest to you, what they call defectors Usually when some people leave Ashraf, they are taken out of the camp. The Iraqi army will put them in isolation for up to 3 months and do the brainwashing. And then they bring them to me to interview them, to sort of put the stamp of the UN that these people have made declarations, serious, very serious declarations. What are these serious declarations? I testify here in front of you that all the people I interviewed, none of them told me anything that has been reported in different reports in Iraq and in Iran and elsewhere, particularly what was reported in the RAND report. And also the so-called the Human Rights Watch report, 2005. All that was fake. And I testify to that. So UNHCR make this as a criteria for dealing with the Ashrafis if they have to defect. They have to run away and submit themselves to the Iraqi army, and then the Iraqi army will take them to the UNHCR. But UNHCR always told us we want to deal with them in total impartiality, neutrality, but still, they put them in Hotel Al-Zuhur, Hotel Al-Muhajir, 2 hotels. And there, the Iranian security people will visit them. And it's a long story. Let me just stop here on this point. Now, when I convinced the UNHCR to visit Camp Ashraf, they said, yes, we are here to take applications from you. We are ready to address your applications and do the interviews here in Ashraf, inside the camp. Few weeks later, they changed their mind because the Iraqis were not happy with that. I said, okay, we will do the interview outside Ashraf. But after the interview, people will go back to Ashraf. And that was the agreement with the Ashrafis. The Ashrafis designated a building where the interviews take place. Then, under the pressure of the government of Iraq, this plan was removed. And then, with the help of Kobler, it's decided to do the interviews outside Camp Liberty. Camp Liberty was known to be a serious threat to the Ashrafis. The UN was aware of that, and we did it. Now, people have witnessed the attack. We know that it's vulnerable. People died. These people must, whoever is behind this process, must be held accountable. I called, and I repeat my call, that there must be an inquiry, an independent inquiry into the killing, into the attack of Camp Liberty and the killing of 7 people and the maiming of over 100 people. The UN has played a fundamental role in this operation. It must send an independent commission of inquiry. Let me say one thing, Mr. President, the very final one, is about why the Ashrafis should be sent back to Ashraf. It's just a question of, I use the military words used in UNAMI. They tell us, and which we have in UNAMI, the safe haven. Safe haven is a military preparation where if any attack takes place, we just go underground and be protected. In Camp Liberty, there is no such a thing. But in Ashraf, there are safe havens. And if we want to take the responsibility to protect these people, the most fundamental concern is the safety and security of these people. Save them before any other process. Let's forget about the refugee status determination process. Let's forget about relocation process. Let's imminent danger is there. Let's protect these people. And I tell you, I said it and I repeat it, there is an imminent danger. And you will hear in a few coming weeks that another attack took place, other people died, and people will come to condemn, and that will be it. I really would like everybody to believe that the danger is imminent, and we need to take action to protect. I thank you very much, Mr. President, for your time.